Class 11, Chapter 17, Locomotion and Movement. Now, movement is one of the significant features of living beings. Animals and plants exhibit a wide range of movements. A streaming of protoplasm in the unicellular organism, like amoeba, is a simple form of movement. Movement of cilia, flagella, and tentacles are shown by many organisms. Human being can move limbs, jaw, eyelids, tongue, etc. Some of the movements result in a change of place or location. Such voluntary movements are called locomotion. Walking, running, climbing, flying, swimming are all some forms of locomotory movement. Locomotory structures need not to be different from those affecting other types of movements. For example, in paramecium, cilia helps in the movement of food through cytopharynx and in the locomotion as well as. Hydra can use its tentacle for capturing its prey and also use them for locomotion. We use limbs for change in body postures and locomotion as well. The above observation suggests that movements and locomotion cannot be studied separately. The two may be linked by stating that all locomotions are movement but all movements are not locomotion. Methods of locomotion performed by animals vary with their habitat and demand of the situation. However, locomotion is generally for search of food, shelter, mate, suitable breeding ground, favorable climatic condition, or to escape from enemies or predators. Now, types of movement. Cells of the human body exhibit three main types of movement, namely amoeboid, ciliary, and muscular. Some specialized cells in our body, like macrophages and leukocytes in food, exhibit amoeboid movement if it is affected by pseudopodia formed by a streaming of protoplasm, as in amoeba. Cytoskeletal elements like microfilaments are also involved in amoeboid movement. Ciliary movement occurs in the most of our internal tubular organs, which are lined by ciliated epithelium. The coordinated movement of cilia in the trachea help us in removing dust particles and some of the foreign substances inhaled along with the atmospheric air. Passage of ova through the female reproductive tract is also facilitated by the ciliary movement. Movement of our limbs, jaw, tongue, etc. require muscular movement. The contractile property of muscles are effectively used for locomotion and other movements by human being and majority of the multicellular organism. Locomotion requires a perfect coordinated activity of muscular, skeletal, and neural system. In this chapter, you will learn about the types of muscles, their structures, mechanism of their contraction, and important aspects of the skeletal system. Now, first, muscles. You have studied in chapter 8 that cilia and flagella are the outgrowth of the cell membrane. Flagellar movement helps in the swimming of spermatozoa, maintenance of water current in the canal system of sponges, and in locomotion of protozoans like Euglena. Muscles is a specialized tissue of mesodermal origin. About 40 to 50% of the body weight of the human adult is contributed by muscles. They have special properties like excitability, contractility, extensibility, and elasticity. Muscles have been classified using different criteria, namely location, appearance, and the nature of regulation of their activities. Based on their location, the three types of muscles are identified: skeletal, visceral, and cardiac. Now, skeletal muscles. It is closely associated with skeletal components of the body. They have a strapped appearance under the microscope and hence are called striated muscles. As their activities are under the voluntary control of the nervous system, they are known as voluntary muscles too. They are primarily involved in locomotory action and changes of the body posture. Visceral muscles are located in the inner walls of the hollow visceral organs of the body like alimentary canal, reproductive tract, etc. etc. They do not exhibit any striation and are smooth in appearance, hence they are called smooth muscles or non-striated muscles. Their activities are not under the voluntary control of the nervous system and are therefore known as the involuntary muscles. They assist, for example, in the transportation of the food through the digestive tract and gametes through the genital tract. As the name suggests, cardiac muscles are the muscles of the heart. Many cardiac muscle cells assemble in a branching pattern to form a cardiac muscles. Based on the appearance, cardiac muscles are striated. They are involuntary in nature as the nervous system does not control their activities directly. Let us examine skeletal muscles in detail to understand the structure and mechanism of contraction. Each organized skeletal muscles in our body is made up of a number of muscle bundles or fascicles held together by a common collagenous connective tissue layer called fascia. Each muscle bundle contains a large number of muscle fibers. Each muscle fibers is lined by the plasma membrane called sarcolemma, enclosing the sarcoplasm. Muscles fiber is a sanctum is as the sarcoplasm contains many nuclei. The endoplasmic reticulum, that is sarcoplasmic reticulum of the muscles fiber, is the storehouse of the calcium ion. A characteristic feature of the muscle fiber is the presence of a large number of parallelly arranged filaments in the sarcoplasm called myofilaments or myofibrils. Each myofibrils has alternate dark and light band on it. A detailed study of the myofibril has established that the striated appearance is due to the distribution pattern of the two important protein actin and myosin. The light band contains actin and is called I band or the isotropic band, whereas the dark band called A or anisotropic band contain myosin. Both the proteins are arranged as rod-like structures parallel to each other and also to the longitudinal axis of the myofibrils. Actin filaments are thinner as compared to the myosin filaments, hence are commonly called thin and thick filament respectively. In the center of the each I band is an elastic fiber called Z lines which bisect it. The thin filaments are firmly attached to the Z line. The thick filaments in the A band are also held together in the middle of this band by the thin fibrous membrane called M line, and the A and I bands are arranged alternatively throughout the length of the myofibrils. The portion of the myofibrils between two successive Z lines is considered as the functional unit of the contraction and is called as a sarcomere. In a resting state, the edges of the thin filament on either side of the thick filament partially overlap the free ends of the thick filament, leaving the central part of the thick filament. This central part of the thick filament not overlapped by thin filament is called H zone. Here is the diagram, you can review it. A structure of contractile protein. Each actin thin filament is made up of two filamentous actins helically bound to each other. Each F actin is a polymer of monomeric G actin. Two filament of another protein tropomyosin and also run close to the F actin throughout its length. A complex protein troponin is distributed at regular interval on the tropomyosin. In the resting state, a subunit of troponin masks the active binding site for the myosin on the actin filament. Each myosin filament is also a polymerized protein. Many monomeric proteins called meromyosin constitute one thick filament. Each meromyosin has two important parts, a globular head with a short arm and a tail, the former being called the heavy meromyosin and the latter the light meromyosin. And the heavy meromyosin component, that is the head and short arm, project outward at regular distance at angle from each other from the surface of a polymerized myosin filament and is also known as cross arm. The globular head is an active ATPase enzyme and has a binding site for ATP and active site for actin. Mechanism of muscle contraction. Mechanism of muscle contraction is best explained by the sliding filament theory, which states that contraction of the muscle fiber takes place by the sliding of the thin filament over the thick filament. Muscles contraction is initiated by a signal sent by the central nervous system by a motor neuron. A motor neuron along with the muscle fibers connected to it constitute to a motor unit. The junction between the motor neuron and the sarcolemma of the muscle fiber is called the neuromuscular junction or motor end plate. A neural signal reaching this junction releases a neurotransmitter which generates an action potential in the sarcolemma. This spreads through the muscle fiber and causes the release of calcium ion into the sarcoplasm. Increase in calcium level leads to the binding of calcium with a subunit of troponin on the actin filament and thereby remove the masking of the active sites or myosin. Utilizing the energy from ATP hydrolysis, the myosin head now binds to the exposed sites, active sites on actin to form a cross bridge. This pulls the attached actin filament towards the center of A band. Z lines attached to these actins are also pulled inwards, thereby causing a shortening of the sarcomere, that is contraction. It is clear from the above steps that during shortening of the muscles, that is contraction, the I bands get reduced, whereas the A bands retain the length. The myosin releasing the ADP and phosphate goes back to the relaxed state, and now new ATP binds and cross bridge is broken. The ATP is again hydrolyzed by the myosin head, and the cycle of the cross bridge formation and breakage is repeated, causing further sliding. The process continues till the calcium ion are pumped back to the sarcoplasmic cisternae, resulting in the masking of the actin filament. This causes the return of Z lines back to their original position, that is relaxation. The reaction time of the fibers can vary in different muscles. Repeated activation of the muscles can lead to the accumulation of lactic acid due to anaerobic breakdown of glycogen in them, causing fatigue. Muscles contains a red color oxygen storing pigment called myoglobin. Myoglobin content is high in some of the muscles, which gives a reddish appearance. Such muscles are called the red fibers. These muscles also contain plenty of mitochondria, which can utilize the large amount of oxygen stored in them for ATP production. These muscles therefore can also be called aerobic muscles. On the other hand, some of the muscles possess very less quantity of myoglobin and therefore appear pale or whitish. These are the white fibers. Numbers of mitochondria are also few in them, but amount of sarcoplasmic reticulum is high. They depend on anaerobic process for energy. Now, a skeletal system. A skeletal system consists of a framework of bones and a few cartilage. This system has a significant role in movement shown by the body. Imagine chewing food without jaw bones and walking around without the limb bones. Bone and cartilage are a specialized connective tissue. The former has a very hard matrix due to calcium salt in it, and the latter has highly pliable matrix due to chondroitin salt. In human being, this system is made up of 206 bones and few cartilage. It is grouped into two principal divisions, the axial and appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton comprises 80 bones distributed along the main axis of the body. The skull, vertebral column, sternum, and the ribs constitute axial bone. The skull is composed of two sets of bone, cranial and facial. Total 22 bones. Cranial bones are 8 in number and they form hard protective outer covering cranium for the brain. The facial region is made up of 14 skeletal elements which forms the front part of the skull. A single U-shaped bone called hyoid is present in the base of the buccal cavity and it is also included in the skull. Each middle ear contains 3 tiny bones, malleus, incus, stapes, collectively called as ear ossicles. The skull region articulates with superior region of the vertebral column with the help of two occipital condyles or dicondylic skull. Our vertebral column is formed by 26 serially arranged units called vertebrae and is dorsally placed. It extends from the base of the skull and constitutes the main framework of the trunk. Each vertebra has a central hollow portion through which the spinal cord passes. First vertebra is the atlas and it articulates with the occipital condyles. The vertebral column is differentiated into cervical 7 bones, thoracic 12, lumbar 5, cervical 1 fused and coccygeal 1 fused regions starting from the skull. The number of cervical vertebrae are 7 in almost all animals including human beings. The vertebral column protects the spinal cord, supports the head and serves as the point of attachment for the ribs and musculature of the back. Sternum is a flat bone on the ventral midline of the thorax. There are 12 pair of the ribs. Each rib is a thin flat bone connected dorsally to the vertebral column and ventrally to the sternum. It has two articulation surfaces on its dorsal end and is hence called bicephalic. First 7 pairs of the ribs are called true ribs. Dorsally they are attached to the thoracic vertebrae and ventrally connected to the sternum with the help of hyaline cartilage. The 8th, 9th and 10th pair of the ribs do not articulate directly with the sternum but join the 7th rib with the help of hyaline cartilage. These are called vertebrochondral rib. Last 2 pairs, 11th and 12th of the ribs are not connected ventrally and are therefore called floating ribs. Thoracic vertebra, ribs and sternum together form the rib cage. The bones of the limbs along with their girdles constitute appendicular skeletal. Each limb is made up of 300 bones, and the bones of the hand, forelimb are humerus, radius, and ulna. Carpals, wrist bones 8 in number, metacarpals palm 5 in number, and phalanges 14 in number, and femur and bone the longest bone. Tibia and fibula tarsal ankles bones 7 in number, metatarsal 5 in number, and phalanges 14 in number digits. Are the bones of the legs, hind legs, a cup-shaped bones called patella cover the knee ventrally, kneecap. Pectoral and pelvic girdle bones help in the articulation of the upper and lower limbs respectively with the axial skeleton. Each girdle is formed of two halves. Each half of the pectoral girdle consists of a clavicle and a scapula. A scapula is a large triangular flat bone situated in the dorsal part of the thorax between the second and the seventh ribs. The dorsal flat triangular body of scapula has a slightly elevated ridge called the spine, which projects as a flat expanded process called acromion. The clavicle articulates with this. Below the acromion is a depression called the glenoid cavity, which articulates with the head of the humerus to the form the shoulder joint. Each clavicle is a long, slender bone with the two curvature. This bone is commonly called collar bone. Pelvic girdle consists of two coaxial bones. Each coaxial bone is formed by the fusion of three bones, ilium, ischium, and pubis. At the point of fusion of the above bones is a cavity called acetabulum, to which the high thigh bone articulates. The two halves of the pelvic girdles meet ventrally to form the pubic symphysis containing fibrous cartilage. Joints. Joints are essential for all the types of movement involving the bony parts of the body. Locomotory movements are no exception to this. Joints are the points of contact between bones and the cartilage. Force generated by the muscles is used to carry out movement through joints, whereas the joint act as a fulcrum. The mobility at these joints vary depending on the different factors. Joints have been classified into three major structural forms, namely fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial. Fibrous joints do not allow any movement. This type of joint is shown by the flat skull bones, which fuse to end with the help of dense fibrous connective tissue in the form of sutures to form the cranium. In cartilaginous joints, the bones involved are joined together with the help of cartilages. The joint between the adjacent vertebra in the vertebral column is of this pattern, and it permits limited movement. Synovial joints are characterized by the presence of a fluid-filled synovial cavity between the articulating surface of the two bones. Such an arrangement allows considerable movement. These joints help in locomotion and many other movements. Ball and socket joints between humerus and pectoral girdle, hinge joint, knee joint, pivot joint between atlas and axis, gliding joint between the carpals, and the saddle joint between the carpals and metacarpals of the thumb are some examples. Disorder or of the muscular and skeletal system. Now, first disorder is myasthenia gravis, autoimmune disorder affecting neuromuscular junction leading to the fatigue, weakening, paralysis, or skeletal muscles. Muscular dystrophy, progressive degeneration of the skeletal muscles, mostly due to the genetic disorder, and the tetany, rapid spasm, wild contraction in muscles due to low calcium ion in body fluid. Arthritis, inflammation of the joints, and the osteoporosis, age-related disorder characterized by the decreased bone mass and increased chances of fractures. Decreased level of estrogen is a common cause. Now last, gout, inflammation of the joints due to the accumulation of the uric acid crystals. So, thank you so much. That's it.